I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome you all here tonight and share your comments with us. This is the public this is a good start. This is the public hearing for the environmental assessment for Arthur Avenue. We have a lot of housekeeping details just to kind of go through so you have an idea of what to expect tonight. First of all, though, I would like to apologize for any inconvenience caused from the confusion about an alleged open house. Not really sure where that came from. It wasn't planned, but nonetheless, we apologize for any inconvenience for those of you who showed up for that. We are here tonight to gather information about the environmental assessment that has been prepared. We're here to present what's in the assessment. We're here to go over the history of the project, and then we're here to get public comment from you, because the way that we deliver a project from the Department of Transportation is to meet the needs of the community. And the only way that we can do that is to hear how this is going to work for you. Let me start with some introductions. My name is Charity Watt-Levis. I'm the Public Information Officer for the Department of Transportation. We have Dwayne Cayley, who is the District Administrator somewhere. Oh, there he is, hiding. Shane Stack from the Missoula District. Susan Kilcrest, she's in the back as well. Mark Stute, Danielle Boland, Ivan Olberg, Greg Teberg, and Laurel DeMont. From Federal Highways, there's Craig Ginslinger. And then our CDM team, who is our consultant for this project, we have Randy Huffsmith, Daryl Stordahl, Larry Murphy, and Ann Vercomboy. We also have Jamil, and I don't really know how to say your last name, Jamil. Chandri? Here. Okay. Let's keep moving. And Steve King, who's from the city. Let's see, we have a lot of, like I said, a lot of housekeeping. Before I forget, there's sign-in sheets at the front as you came in. We hope that everyone, and encourage everyone to sign up so that we have it on public record that you are here. We also have sign-up sheets if you're interested in commenting tonight, and those will be out at the back table if you want to go out and sign up. During the public comment period, what we're going to do is we're going to go over the project, what's in the EA, and then we'll open things up for public comment. During that time, that's not really a question and answer period. It is an opportunity for you to let us know what you think about what's in the environmental assessment. If you haven't had an opportunity to review that assessment, if you're not prepared to give comments tonight, the comment period is open until June 2nd. You can submit your comments in writing, either by mail or we have forms here tonight you can fill out, or also on the internet. And all of that information is at the bottom of the comment sheets that are out on the tables in the lobby. Just so you know, we are recording this public meeting. Everything that happens here is a matter of record. We have a stenographer that will start as soon as the public comment period begins. We ask that you'll state your name clearly for her to make her life a little bit easier. Also want to let you know that there were some green information sheets that were passed out as you came in. Just so there's no confusion, those are not information that's not information that was prepared by the Department of Transportation. If you have any questions on that, just let us know. And at this point, I'd like to turn things over to Jamil, who has a few things to say on behalf of the university.
Thank you everyone for taking the time out of your busy evenings to come over here. We appreciate all of the comments that you will provide. And from the university side, I would just like to say that we've been following this particular project, trying to get something done since 1990. So it's been a long, kind of a dragged out project. And it's taken on a rather keener interest from our perspective since 3 years ago, a faculty member was hit by a car and passed away right there on Maurice Street, which is part of this particular project. So from our perspective, trying to get Highway 12 traffic out from coming into campus and then looping back out over Madison Street Bridge is of vital interest and importance to us. We're particularly interested, the university and the city, in option 1, but we do want to get all of the comments we can about all of the other options and ideas you have out there. So thank you very much.
And Steve, do you have any comments on behalf of the city?
Thank you. I'm Steve King with City Public Works. Just want to introduce myself to let you know that the city's in partnership with the Department of Transportation and the university. And we have a vested interest in the safety of an operation of the roadways in our local community. The character of the community is very important. So look to the eye of what is being proposed as far as comparison of other features in town. Stevens Avenue is a likely comparison for width, landscaping features, possibility for lighting, and those type of amenities that could fit into a neighborhood. So start to think about that type of a corridor as a gateway to the north end of campus. Also, I want to echo what Jamil said about safety. Routing highway traffic around the north end of campus has demonstrated to be a fatal combination. We have a responsibility in City Public Works to look for safety enhancements, and that's why we're very happy to be working with the department tonight on an enhancement for the corridor for both Highway 12 traffic and most particularly the City of Missoula traffic as well. Thank you.
Can you all see that in the back? Is that okay? I'm seeing some thumbs up. Thank you. I'm Shane Stack with the Department of Transportation. I work out of the Missoula District. I live in Missoula and familiar with the area. Just going to give you a brief overview here. The presentation, we're going to start off with the project background, kind of how it started, where it came from, the history and milestones of the project, the goals and the scope of work of the project, what we're trying to strive for, alternatives, analysis, and preliminary designs. We'll go over some of the alternatives and how they were analyzed. And then finally, we'll open it up for public comment, and if you don't want to come up and speak, we'll tell you how to give us your comments after that. Okay. All right. Can you hear me now? Yes. It's like a Verizon commercial. All right. Shoot. Go ahead. All right, I guess I'll describe the actual project location. This is the existing configuration the way it is now. This is 6th Street as you're headed east into the campus area here. This is the big parking lot for the field house. Campus Drive, parking lot over here by Mountain Water, and then this is your northern route for Highway 12 out, and then onto the Madison Street Bridge. And then this would be off of the Madison Street Bridge onto either 5th Street towards the west or south on Arthur Avenue. That is all of Highway 12. All these roads that I'm showing you right now are all Highway 12. Highway 12 basically in the city of Missoula starts at the intersection of Reserve Street and Brooks. And for those of you who live here, that's out by Kmart or I think it's the Village 6 or Big Lots, any of those stores kind of on the west end of town. That's basically where this roadway starts, where Highway 12 starts through the city of Missoula. It runs down Brook Street, a short distance along Higgins, and then connects up to 6th Street, where you see it here, and then back up to Broadway, and then basically follows 5th down to Higgins, and then follows itself back out. So that's the route. And I know there's a lot of questions about why it's in town and how can we get it out. And I'm just going to give you a brief description. In order, and this is not part of this project. This has nothing to do with this project. I'm just going to try and give you some information, just because I have received some comments on how can we get Highway 12 off of or out of the city, or that designation out of the city. Basically, you would have to come up with a government entity, and I'm just going to randomly throw out the city. And the city hasn't stepped up to the plate and said they want that roadway, but you're basically going to have to find somebody, a government agency, that's willing to take over the maintenance and ownership and liability of that roadway, and send the request to the Department of Transportation, and they'll basically send that request after some review to the Transportation Commission. The Transportation Commission then would either vote on to take that route off and give it to the city, or keep it with the state of Montana. And I think they would look at what's best for the city of Missoula, what's best for the traveling public if they made that decision. So I just wanted to give you a brief explanation on how that would happen. And just to reiterate, the city would have to take over maintenance and ownership of that roadway. Transportation Commission would have to approve, and basically that's the steps to go that route. Back to this project anyway. Madison Street Bridge is not part of this project. It's just off the project limits. And your project limits are basically where you're seeing my laser pointer here. Basically, this area that's shown on the picture up there is the project limits. We're not going to do anything on the other side of the bridge. We're not doing anything on campus. It's just that area that you see there. Real quick on the project purpose. What we want to do is improve automobile, bicycle, pedestrian flow on US Highway 12 and allow for safe and efficient movement of traffic. That's basically straight out of the EAA, and that is our goal. That's what we want to do. Go ahead, Daryl. Project goals. We want to maintain uniform volume capacity. What we don't want to do is put in some intersection devices that reduce capacity or constrict flow and add to congestion and poor air quality. We want to be able to keep that same capacity, keep the same amount of traffic being able to flow through there. We don't want to decrease. Increase safety, comfort, and convenience of the traveling public, something that we want to do on all projects. Provide a more direct route for Highway 12 traffic. So if you can see this guy here, right now that Highway 12 traffic goes along Maurice Avenue. If we could get that, and that was one of our goals, is if we could get that out of there, that might improve things along the or around the campus. More efficient, user-friendly entrance to the university. I want to improve the entrance and the exits to the university, and I'm sure most of you have been to a Grizz football game, and you know what it's like to get out of here, and we want to be able to, improve on that and get out or even get in to the university area. Again, decrease impacts to university, special events, increase safety, efficiency for the traveling public. Touched on that. Positive effect on air quality. We're in an MPO. Missoula's a metropolitan planning organization because of the air quality. Anything we do when we're spending federal dollars on roadways, we've got to show that's going to improve the air quality, or at least maintain. Update existing roadway facility. The way you see it now is basically constructed in 1957. And we can do some context-sensitive design that possibly wasn't around in 1957, offer up some pedestrian bike enhancements that possibly weren't around in 1957, and improve the intersection overall since it was constructed. And finally, we want to comply with the MOU, and I'll touch on the MOU in a second, but basically that was an agreement between, or an understanding between the city, the University of Montana, and MDT. Go ahead, Daryl. Funding for the project. Start off MACI, the Montana Air and Congestion Initiative. Basically, that's an offshoot of CMAQ, congestion mitigation, air quality funding. It's federal dollars, and we use that money to improve air quality, reduce congestion. And that's basically the goal with MACI is, as far as the state of Montana is concerned, is we like to spend that MACI fund on improving air quality or reducing congestion. We've got some urban highway pilot improvement program that was some funding that was federal dollars that we intended to spend in a short period of time, and doesn't exist anymore. This is probably the last remaining bits of it that was designated for this project. So once this is spent, this UPEP money, then it's ultimately done with. And then finally, STPP, or the Surface Transportation Program primary funds, which is going to be a majority of the funding for this project, because Highway 12 is a primary route. It is fundable through the primary system funding, which is the STPP. And with all that federal funding comes federal regulations, and we need to spend that money in a certain way. Otherwise, the FHWA will not participate and not reimburse us. The university, as far as funding, they're going to provide the necessary right-of-way, or almost all of the necessary right-of-way required for this project. And I guess we'll go into that later. But signing parties of the MOU, MDT, City of Missoula, University of Montana. It was basically signed in May of 2001, allowing for a realignment of Highway 12. And the big concern was, how can we get traffic off of this section here of Maurice and possibly or potentially get it over here? And with that would come elimination of Highway 12 traffic here and here on 5th and 6th. The land acquisition that I talked about earlier, this is the property right here that the university would donate to the project. And then beyond that, we would need, according to the EA, approximately 5 square meters or 54 square feet for some sidewalk improvements, which isn't a whole lot. And then I guess I'll just touch on right-of-way acquisition process for that 5 square meters. What would normally happen if in any highway project, when we go to acquire right-of-way or land to build or reconstruct a roadway, we get in touch with the landowner. They can be involved with the appraisal process, which is a process of valuing that land. And then after that, then they go into negotiations, and hopefully at that point we would acquire the property. That's the simple end of it. Generally, you're contacted, if you're a landowner, approximately a year before construction. So we give ourselves about a year for negotiation time. Project history and milestones to date. We've done the preliminary design report. We do that on all projects. That was done early on. Traffic data collection. Supporting documentation, basically what's in the traffic data collection that's used in the environmental assessment. We look at accidents, traffic volumes, what's gonna be there in the future, what's there now, and what changes can be made to improve on capacity, or how can we accommodate all that traffic that's potentially coming down the pike. Cultural resources and historic report. Basically look at the historical buildings or structures in the area to see if we're going to impact those, what mitigation would we have to do on that. Your cultural, you're going to look at like your parks. Are there parks that we're going to impact, or 4F properties? Those are examples of what lies in Missoula that we would have to consider. Public meetings. We've had several public and stakeholder group meetings throughout this project to get public input. We've had a lot of public comment on this project. It's had a lot of public involvement. Detailed alternative review process. We're going to review all the alternatives and in detail, and the preliminary alternative especially, and find out, are we going wrong somewhere? Where are we going wrong if we are? To find out the best way to do this project. And finally, right now, the environmental assessment. We've got a document out for review to the public, and it's kind of where we are right now. With that, I will turn it over to Larry Murphy with CDM, and he will discuss the EA.
Thanks, Shane. Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? No. Where's our... Can you hear me now? All right, sorry. I know my voice doesn't transmit too well, sir, but I'll try. If you can't hear me in the back, start waving. CDM's the name of our company. Thank you. It's really CDM, but it used to be called Camp Dresser and McKee, but it's really CDM. We're not answering questions. We're just going through the presentation. The EA is the environmental assessment. Sorry. All right. All right. So can you hear me? No. Can we turn it up? I'll talk really loud. All right. Here we go. As Shane said, we put together the environmental assessment, the EA, as I'll call it from here to forward. And a lot of work's gone into it in the development of the preferred alternative. It's not something, the preferred alternative is not something that we just come up with. We looked at a lot of different alternatives, and we look at the impacts of each alternative, and we come up with what we feel is the best alternative, the one that may have the least amount of impacts. And what I'm going to go through is kind of like a little discussion on the process that we went through, and then some information on the preferred alternative that we had. So as you can see, there's an evolution to the design process, as I was discussing. There are several alternatives were considered and evaluated for the project, and implementation is based on the ability of the alternative to meet the purpose of the project and a need in a reasonable and prudent manner. And this is outlined in the EA. And if you look at the EA, all this information is in it. Louder? Sorry. Hold it up to my mouth. I feel like I'm being punked or something like that. Okay. All right. So is that better? Sorry about that. Basically, what I was saying, for those who didn't hear me, is that the EA, the process of development of the EA goes through a lot of work, and each alternative is evaluated, and we look at impacts that are associated with each alternative, and we come up with, we feel, the preferred alternative is the one that may have the least impacts. In the process, the alternatives that we looked at a variety of different types of solutions to this, to making this project the best project. One of them is looking at a roundabout, and there's been a lot of public information on the roundabouts, use of those on this project. Flyovers, which would be one leg of the roadway going over the other one. A more standard type of an improvement, which would basically be improving signals. And then there's the realignment option. When we looked at the flyovers, the expense of it kind of washed them out. They were just really expensive. There was the cost and the construction feasibility component. As you know, as you come over the Madison Street Bridge, there's a lot of grade. If you look to your right when you're going over the bridge, there's a deep cut down there. And there'd be a lot of work that'd be required to put a flyover in to make that work. And the cost of a flyover is very expensive. And in addition to that, the flyover is difficult for pedestrian and bicycle movements. Standard improvements, this is what I was referring to, basically trying to come up with some kind of improvements. Maybe you look at the existing roadway system as it is and say, all right, well, what we can do is we can look at the signal timing. We can make some improvements to the signal to see if that would work, add some new pavement markings, maybe add some more signings to try to make it safe through there. When we evaluated those type of improvements and compared it to the needs of the project, we found that this type of improvement would not meet the project goals. So then we came up with the realignment type of an approach. And on the realignment, we looked at several, it was like almost 24 different alignments that we looked at. And if you look at the EA, you'll see those alternatives that we looked at within there. 19 of the ones that we looked at are in the EA. So roundabouts, they're a popular thing. We use them a lot. CDM, we design a lot of them. I'm involved in several projects. So it was one of the things that we looked at. And pointer work. We looked at basically two types for this project, a single and a double lane. And we tried to make it work, as we did with all the alternatives, to see how they worked. And in general, as you can see, a roundabout is a very good tool for improving traffic flow around an intersection. There is a federal design criteria. FHWA is the Federal Highway Administration. They have a design guide that's used nationwide for the design of roundabouts. And as we put together the alternatives for this project, we use that design criteria. The EA also evaluates the use of roundabouts as an improvement. We looked at 3 types, and that's on the next slide, Darryl. We looked at an urban compact roundabout, which basically, if you look at the roundabouts here, the small circle in the middle, if you have an urban compact roundabout, that small circle is very small. We looked at a single lane roundabout, which is the one here, which is single lane, and we looked at a double lane roundabout, which is over there. And all these documents are in the EA. The outcome of the analysis for the roundabout, we found that we had some issues with each of those types that kind of knocked it out of the preferred alternative. Some of those related to capacity or the level of service. There was rights-of-way impacts with either of the roundabouts that we looked at. There was also site distance issues that came into play. And also, there's a consideration nationwide on how people that are mobility challenged can use a roundabout properly. Next slide. I'll talk about the single-lane roundabout first. The single-lane roundabout, when we looked at it, we took the traffic counts that Shane talked about, and we modeled through some software to see, that was our first test, to see if the single-lane roundabout would have the capacity to process the flow through that. And we found that it did not. And in the document, the EA explains that. I have a slide afterwards that kind of shows how that model actually worked. The site distance, inadequate site distance, as you come over the Madison Street Bridge, you've got, you're coming like over a curve and around a corner. And when you're coming over the curve and around the corner, even now you can't see that intersection very good as it's coming up there. Right now there's not a stop condition as you go through there, you're just kind of driving right through. So when you put a roundabout in there or even a traffic signal in there, hold on a second. You're waving your arms? You can't hear us? Closer like this. All right, sorry. Okay, single lane roundabout doesn't have capacity. It has inadequate sight distance. Also, we looked at it, and it required the taking of right-of-way that's not included in the MOU. The MOU, if you remember, was the Memorandum of Understanding with the university. And as a result of the design of the roundabout, we ended up impacting properties that were outside of that. As I said, it impacts the properties that weren't owned by the U of M, and the properties that impacted also were historical. The concerns related to the mobility challenged pedestrians, this really kind of deals with the blind people. And as I said, there's a nationwide investigation right now going on how to handle blind people at these intersections, because they're difficult for them to see. At a normal intersection, they can hit a pedestrian button and there's either an audible sound or they can actually hear the car stopping. But in a roundabout, they don't have that opportunity. Next slide. This kind of highlights a couple of the issues that I was talking about for the single lane roundabout, the poor sight distance as you're coming over the Madison Street Bridge. The safety issues related to the pedestrians, the mobility challenged people, and the additional right-of-way that's required. This house here gets impacted, and this house here gets impacted. Next slide. I talked about the primary reason why the single lane roundabout didn't work, and it really boils down to the capacity. We modeled this roundabout based on 2006 traffic that's today. This model shows the peak traffic being modeled through a single lane roundabout. As you know right now, the Madison Street Bridge, you've got 2 lanes coming across there. When you funnel that down into a single lane, it tends to back up. And the model showed that. If you see this is cars backing up onto the bridge. And they also back up on 6th Street. They back up past the first intersection, which is Helen Avenue there. This gives us an unacceptable level of service, one of the criteria that we use when we evaluate different alternatives. Next slide. So then what we did is we looked at a double lane. That's the next step that you would do. If a single lane doesn't work, all right, we're going to try to get a double lane to go in there. And we found that the double lane, as far as the capacity goes, the double lane was able to pretty much handle the flow through there, although in some of the later year designs, it kicked out to a level of service E. The diameter, the 197 feet that's required based on the design vehicle, this is a double lane one over here, and these documents are in the EA. The diameter that I'm referring to is this here, that outside diameter on my hand. It's shaking too much. And that's about 200 feet, and you achieve that by developing an approach angle coming into the roundabout, and we use software that looks at a vehicle, actually tracks a vehicle going around, And we looked at a truck, because there's a lot of trucks that will be using this road. So we sized that based on that so that the truck won't go over into the other lane and won't cross over, and that ends up driving the size of it. When we ended up with a design, as you can look at it, it impacts a lot of the properties around in here. It ends up, we would end up having to demolish 4 additional houses that weren't considered in the MOU, and all those were historic houses. We also have some concerns related to the bike movement and pedestrian movement through the roundabout, particularly the bikes. You have, when you've got trucks in a double roundabout, they tend to stray over the lines. And if you've got a bike that's trying to use the roundabout as a car and wants to be in the lane, he ends up, if he wants to go south, he ends up being on the inside lane to get across that. And if you got a truck that's in the outside lane and the bicycle in the inside lane, it brings a really unsafe interaction between the bike and the truck. And you can also get it with cars too. And as I alluded to, you also have some sight distance concerns coming in. When you've got a roundabout, it's important to be able to see the roundabout as you're coming up there. And most recommendations, there it's better, I can tell, require that you have the roundabout lit so that if you're approaching it at night, you can see it okay. And that kind of relates to the sight distance thing as well. There. And this just highlights some of the things I was talking about. In addition to the geometry of it, when you've got Fifth Street here, there's a movement that comes across right in here. You guys can see that. The geometry of this roundabout, we try to make it work, but this is really kind of unstandard here. And what happens and why it doesn't work is the beauty of a roundabout is it slows people down in there, and you need people to go slow. As you approach a roundabout, the cars yield going into the cars that are on the inside. That's how they function. What happens is that when you get a movement like this, we call it like a free movement. And what happens is that these guys don't yield like they're supposed to. So it ends up kind of bringing a conflict point here. And the studies have shown that these are unsafe. I talked about the complexities of a biker in the double lane roundabout and how the trucks will stray, and the additional rights of way, and the houses that are looking at are this one and this one and this one and this one. These are all historic houses that would have to be demolished as a result of that. Next slide.
Are you going to do the same?
I'm sorry, we can't take questions. All right, so when we went through the analysis of the flyovers and the standard improvements and the roundabouts, we ended up boiling down to this is what our preferred alternative was. And we really feel that this is the best alternative for the project because it has the least impacts on the things that we look at. We look at impacts on rights of way. We look at the goals of the project. Is it comply with the MOU? Wetlands impacts. A lot of other varieties that are spelled out in the EA. And you can see that there's a matrix there. Thank you. There's a matrix that it's been developed, and we analyze all the alternatives based on that matrix. And the preferred alternative, as you can see, we have improvements to traffic. We provided a significant amount of bike lanes, as you can see along the outsides here. We think, improved pedestrian access, because right now there's going to be a signal at the intersection, which is going to provide solid pedestrian safety. Right now, if you go to cross that intersection, there's really nothing protecting you. The cars are free to move through. This alternative will be designed with a signalized intersection. The intersection will be synchronized so they basically talk to each other so traffic moves through well. Each one's going to have a pedestrian button there that we designed the timing there so that we look at how long it is that someone has to go across, and we design that so it goes for a specific amount of time based on the distance that they travel so that they have time to get across the intersection. This is all things that will be done to help not only the cars get through, but the pedestrians and the bikes. We provided shoulders, medians, and sidewalks. One of the things that I think is going to look nice is a vegetated boulevard here that we're putting in here, similar to Stevens Street. In the character of it, this is actually a little bit wider than the boulevard of Stevens Street. but it's going to be planted. And if you see, there's some like renderings around here somewhere that what we think it will look like. I discussed the traffic control.
Send it FCC. Send it what? Anachronism again?
I'm sorry. I don't know what you mean.
Well, you said it's send it some anachronism. And also, before you go on, please tell me what your company is and who you were hired by.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, but if you would just hold all of your questions until the end, we're happy to stick around and answer those questions because this is a public hearing and we're here to take public comment about the project after we present what's in the environmental assessment. We'll take those questions after the hearing's closed. Thank you.
But we can't, if he uses an acronym, then I won't know what you're talking about.
I don't know what acronym I use, but everything that I'm covering here is in the EA, so if you look in the EA, you'll be able to refer to it. Safety and operational improvements, these are paramount, obviously, in the project, and the design as we propose here will do a good job of conveying Route 12 traffic away from the area that we don't want it to be and moving it up and across the Madden Street Bridge. Yeah. As another part of the project, we're going to be improved the advanced signing for Route 12 so that people know, where they are driving as they go through. The pedestrian sidewalks are going to be built in compliance with the ADA requirements. And another part of the project will be to improve the stormwater system in the area. Oh, ADA is the American Disability Act, and that's a basis for design. Okay, so within the preferred alternative, we have two options that you can see up here. Here's one option, and here's the other option. Option one, basically, if you're coming up Arthur Avenue under the new proposed Route 12, you won't be allowed to take a left onto 5th Street. There is a potential that this is a conflict with the MOU, but we don't think this is a problem. There will also be some loss of parking on 5th Street, and that's to accommodate, once again, to accommodate the large trucks that we see coming in there. And if you can look at this drawing right here, if you got a truck that comes down 6th Street and up Maurice and takes a left, to make that movement, there's a couple of parking spots that we would have to lose as a result of that. One of the other significant changes that the preferred alternatives are going to be providing is that Maurice Street is now going to be two-way, where it's one way, one direction right now, so it's going to be two-directional. Option 2 provides a left-hand turn lane. This is option 2 here. And again, these documents are in the EA. Option 2 provides a left turn lane, so if you're going north on Arthur Avenue, you can take a left onto 5th Street, so you wouldn't be required to go around the block. We looked a lot into the pedestrian movements that were the difference between option 1 and option 2. And in our minds, that was one of the big differences between two options. So we looked at it pretty closely at what the impact it would be to the pedestrians. Option 1, the curb-to-curb distance, which would be the outside of the curb to the outside of the curb over here, is going to be 95 feet. What we've got for what we're calling the exposure to motor vehicles is, because there's a big median in here, this is going to be that planted boulevard, there's an island, this area in here where there's not going to be any vehicles in there. So we're calling this exposure to vehicles like 62 feet. In the reality, it's just going to be two 12-foot lanes on each side, 48 feet. And there's also the additional feet. You're saying, well, why is it 62? Well, it's because we've got the bike lanes in there too. But we included that in the exposure to motor vehicles. Compared to option 2, the curb-to-curb is about 105 feet. The exposure to vehicles there is about 89 feet. If you look at an average person, when we do the design of the pedestrian signal, we actually look at these distances and we equate that. They use a formula of the average person walks at 3.5 feet per second, and we will time the signal so that people have the adequate time to get across safely. If you look at the differences between, this is a 10-foot difference. That's really only like about 10 seconds difference. Stevens Avenue, we went, let's look at some of the other areas in town, and so people can kind of compare the what we're looking at. So we went out to Stevens Avenue at Addison Street, and we measured the curb-to-curb distance. And out at Stevens Avenue, interestingly, or not, but to us it was interesting, they've got more pavement out there because they've got parking lanes out here. But at the intersections, as they approach intersections, we call it bulbing out the intersection. You can see one right here. And so they narrowed up the pedestrian distance there. There's also a small island in the middle of Stevens Street, which is about 5 feet. So we equated the exposure to vehicles at Stevens at about 70 feet. We also looked at Broadway at Mullen Road. It's a pretty broad area out in there. The distance curb to curb is about 125 feet. And on Broadway, there's no islands or anything out there. So we're looking at it for the exposure of about 125 feet out there. So you can see that, our exposure, 62 feet of exposure here is actually, less than the other areas in the town you may be similar to. All right, so the summary of the preferred alternatives. And this comes back kind of to making sure that we looked at the goals that we were trying to achieve. The primary one is that we maintain a uniform volume and capacity through the intersection, that we're providing a more direct route for Route 12, that we improve the access to the university, that we accommodate trucks, cars, pedestrians, and bikes, that we have a positive effect on the air quality. And how we're able to achieve that is because we're going to be synchronizing the signals as we go through there. There'll be less delay for vehicles going through there. It does comply with the MOU. And of the alternatives that we looked at, all the 19 alternatives, this alternative has the least impact onto Rankin Park. We're looking at about 1/4 of an acre of impact. There is going to be 2 University of Montana-owned properties, historic properties, that are going to be impacted by this project. To mitigate that, there's going to be a record taken of that. They'll be there documenting the house, the condition of it, and there will be opportunities to move the house to a different location. There's also going to be some trees that are impacted by the project. Obviously we're going through this area in here, and there's going to be some trees, but there's going to be some planting also, and we're going to have an overall increase in the number of trees and landscaping in the area. So at the end of the day, you're going to end up with more. And there is going to be some minimal right-of-way required, which Shane alluded to. It's going to be about 54 square feet, which is a pretty small area that we anticipate we're going to see primarily for getting in some of the sidewalks. Another issue that we wanted to look at and bring your attention is how how this whole the pedestrian and bike accommodation is going to be kind of fitting into this project. And as you probably know, there is a new bridge that goes underneath the Madison Street Bridge, the bike and pedestrian underpass, that's going to be connecting to this whole system. So we're providing, we think, a good system of additional bike lanes onto the existing road, but also we're working with the university and to get even an improved access in a separation of the bikes and the pedestrians. And right now there's a schedule to finish that loop during this upcoming summer. That was a picture of the underpass. So I'm going to turn this over to Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. My name is Mark Stuten. I'm with the Montana Department of Transportation. And can everybody hear me okay back there? Hope so. We've got our sound things taken care of. I'm the project manager for the Department of Transportation that manages the consultant firm CDM here. And appreciate your input as a public, what we've had to date to get to this document that we've put together. And it was through your input that we've been able to address some of your concerns and get that incorporated into the document. So I definitely want to thank you for that. There's, looking at the timeline here, obviously when you saw the notice of availability, hopefully in the paper or elsewhere, there was a lot of background that went in before that April 10th date, and that included following an extensive state and federal requirements to prepare the environmental document itself, and public involvement meetings, things like that, and taking your comments and getting those incorporated in there. So with that, we had to go through legal sufficiency review, get cooperating agency review. Both the city and the university were part of our review team to make sure that we had those items taken care of in the document itself. And then once approved by the Department of Transportation and the Federal Highways, we released the document then to you, which, as you can see by the timeline here, started your public hearing, the public comment period. And here we are today at the public hearing itself. We're here to gather your comments specifically on the document. And that's not your only opportunity. As you can see on the timeline here, you've got until June 2nd, which is actually a 54-day comment period if you're counting calendar days there. That gives more than ample opportunity, and it exceeds the federal requirements, and we definitely wanted to get your input from that. After that comment period closes, and we gather those comments, and we'll try and incorporate those comments and respond to those in the next step as far as the environmental document phase. And what we will be preparing is a request for finding of no significant impact. There's your acronym right there, FONSI is what we call it. And that is a request pending on the outcome of what we see for comments from the public, and try and incorporate that into the document. And we want to just make sure that we haven't forgotten anything in our analysis, and make sure that we've got everything addressed. And with that request, if that's the way that portion of it goes, that FONSI would be then released to the public. You would get to see what those specific responses were, and that would close the environmental process if that's the preferred route. Another option, of course, is as a baseline that's outlined in the environmental assessment, is the no-build option, and that is always an alternate. We don't technically have a no-build board up here, but that is always an option, in which case the project goes away. The last avenue that this particular environmental document could go is through a environmental impact statement. If we've discovered enough information from the public here, we would elevate that level of documentation to an environmental impact statement level, which is an EIS, which has additional public hearings and thicker document ultimately. So with that, we would try and finalize that environmental document, and it kind of depends on the input that we receive from you as the city and the community here. And we would try and finalize that here in the fall of 2006, at least that's what we would anticipate. From that then, after we would close that environmental document process, we would go on to what we call the scope of work phase, and then into final design, and ultimately trying to get you a project here that, based on available funding and timelines and things like that, we would have proposed construction in 2009. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Charity, and she's going to summarize some of the ground rules for commenting on this document.
Did everybody who is intending to speak tonight have a chance to sign up on the sign-up sheets? Okay, so not too many other people. We're just trying to get an idea of, we want everybody to have an opportunity to speak. It looks like we have probably about 25 people. So some of you I know will talk longer and some of you will talk shorter, but if you could limit your comments to about 3 minutes, and then at the end, if there's time to go ahead and continue, you can get up in line again. You also have the opportunity to finish your comments in writing. And again, the reason for the limit on the time is so that everybody who's here that does want to comment can have an opportunity to do that. And we did mention that there are other opportunities. If you're not prepared to speak tonight and something comes up that you think of when you go home or when you look at the EA at another opportunity, we encourage you to get your comments into us in writing by June 2nd. I'll just read off some of the spots that the EA is available. It's available online at our website. It's also available at the MDT office on Broadway. It is available at the city, in the Public Works Department. It's also available at the City Library, at the ASUM office, and at the Mansfield Library. There are copies, a couple copies outside for you to look at here, and we ask you not to take those with you tonight. The sign-up sheets were at the front door, but I can just go ahead, and do you want me to just pass this around and you can just sign up on it? And I have another sheet as well, so we'll just make sure it makes its way back up front. We do have a microphone set up here. We ask that when you start to make your comments that you do state your name clearly for the record. And with that, I think we're ready to begin. Can we turn on the lights? Ken Willett.
Is it on? It's on now. First thing, Ken Willett with the Office of Public Safety, University of Montana. The first thing I'd like to say is, at least from my standpoint, and hopefully the rest of the university, the preferred alternative, option 1, which has the no left turn, would probably be the best option for the comings and goings and activities that we have. I do have a concern with 20-plus years of experience in dealing with traffic flow to the ball games, football, basketball, concerts, drama performances, and then other shows that appear at the Adams Center, that we're going to end up with a problem with a one-block funneling down to one lane there between Arthur and Maurice. We've talked about making it a super wide, which will give us the ability to move emergency vehicles. But my concern is Monday to Friday from about 7 in the morning to 9:30, and then Saturday at game days for people coming in, and the same thing with other performances. That traffic will back up when you go from 2 down to 1 in a one-block span. If they could maybe take a look at that, I would appreciate it. And I was also wondering, I noticed they talked about the new underbridge project, and where we connect with that at Lot M1, how we will address that crossing, since it's right on the edge or contiguous to this project. We'll be trying to get that started hopefully this summer in July and finish it. And that will be a critical point where we have foot traffic and bicycle traffic. It's already there without the bridge or anything, so. The only other thing I would say is, I think that this project is going to interconnect with other projects within the community, and the one I'm thinking of is the proposed intersection at Higgins, Beckwith, and I think it's Hill or Mount. as you move traffic down Arthur, it's got only so many directions it can head. And so at that point, both of these are going to impact each other. So as long as the design takes that into consideration, I think it's important that we do that. My 3 minutes up? Thank you.
Did everybody get a chance to sign up on this? And we'll just kind of keep passing it around till we run out of names on this list, if that's all right. Bob Giordano. Yay. And just so it's clear, the comments that are being taken tonight will be addressed, as Mark stated in the environmental document. If you're wondering what happens and how these questions are addressed, they're all addressed in that document. And I want to reiterate that our staff will be around after the comment period so that you can ask questions.
Can I turn this around? Yeah, I want to turn this around. I feel like we're interacting with each other as much as talking to MDT and CDM. Thank you. My name's Bob Giordano, and I'm a citizen, and I also run Missoula Institute for Sustainable Transportation. I'm going to speak for both. We feel that, and I feel that this project is basically out of character with what we have right here in the university area. Can you hear me in the back? I think we can just do a much better job at working with all modes of transportation, and I applaud the thick environmental assessment you have together, but I feel strongly that it's based on other places or highway models or things that are not appropriate right next to campus, where we have so many people walking and biking, and driving is not the only thing. But the irony is, I don't think this will be a good plan for the driving part of all of us, because a lot of us do all modes of transportation at different times. With the no left turn option that seems to be gaining some momentum, I want to point out 3 big challenges that I don't think is going to work well with that. One is, even though it's not a big turning movement, people will either go around the block, they'll cut through the neighborhood, or a big concern is there'll be a no left turn box on the light pole, is what I'm guessing. And we see this on Higgins and in lots of roads. It says no left turn, but people make that left turn all the time. And now it's a dangerous bicycle maneuver, but coming down that bridge and making the crossover maneuver like you have, I think it's going to be a huge safety issue. With the professor that was killed there, I don't think what you're planning is going to make this area much safer. You talk about Stevens, but that was a very huge road, and it got a little better by becoming narrow. This is proposing to be a big expansion, and there are people that are hit on Stevens. The Broadway example you use, that's a real big issue. 5 pedestrians have died in the last 7 years. Last year was a record year. 5 pedestrians were killed in Missoula. I think we need to make a turn here, and let's do transportation that works for everyone and does not have motor vehicle speeds and capacity as the number one thing. So the impacts are too negative. I would ask that you stop this project, maybe reroute Highway 12. Let's have a more locally based project. The Madison Underbridge, that's a great piece, but it's a trail piece. It's going to probably bring more bikes and peds to that area, and the way that you have aligned, I don't think is going to solve the huge safety issue we have there. So, there's some flaws that I see in the EA with single-lane roundabouts. The size does not have to be so big, and there's ways to improve the capacity, but capacity should not be the number one thing. Capacity of motor vehicles, it's all of us and how we move around in this community. Thank you.
All right. Forgive me if I mispronounce your names, but hopefully you can understand my interpretation. Kim Pappas.
I guess I'm facing everybody now. Freaky. Hi, my name is Kim Pappas. I'm a student at the University of Montana and an active citizen in Missoula and the state. As the child of an Air Force engineer and then gone business, I've spent a lot of my life moving, and as a result, I've spent a lot of time in many towns and cities across the U.S. At age 18, I moved to Missoula, and I've been here ever since for the past 4 years. Missoula has an interesting and exciting culture filled with diversity, creativity, and art. three characteristics that are unique to Missoula in this state, which is why I support roundabouts as used in the citizen plan presented by Bob Giordano, who I guess he hasn't presented it yet. They are essential examples of creative innovations that come to Missoula before other towns in the state. As I mentioned earlier, my history of moving, because I've spent a significant amount of time in 3 other cities that use roundabouts: Forest Grove, Oregon, Bend, Oregon, and Olympia, Washington. Both Bend, Oregon, and Olympia, Washington have populations pretty similar to Missoula, people coming in daily into town, and a lot of traffic. Bend having a climate that's similar to Missoula as well, with heavy, cold winters, lots of snow, lots of wind. And I actually have no complaints for roundabouts whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I love them, and they could be incorporated into the Missoula transportation system and incorporated into Missoula culture. Another benefit to roundabouts and how they could fit into Missoula's atmosphere is one used in Bend, Oregon. In the center of many of the roundabouts in Bend, there are sculptures and other pieces of art from local artists. Although I fully believe roundabouts are the safest and most efficient ideas for this project, I'm not going to talk about those, and you're going to hear from everybody. So instead, I'm focusing more so on the artistic and aesthetic value of them. So I want the MDT and the people of Missoula to understand the culture of Missoula when researching the different alternatives to this project. The new innovations, the diversity, and the aesthetic quality. So when considering all of these options, thank you.
Mary Ellen Carter. There she is. Is that sign-up sheet still going around? Did everybody get on it? If you change your mind.
I'm a student here at the university. My name's Mary Ellen Carter, and I also live in the neighborhood. And I'd just like to say I appreciate the plan's concern for safety. That road is pretty dangerous, and I knew the professor that was killed there, and I'm glad to see people trying to fix that problem. And I see that you put a lot of work into the plan, but I don't think it addresses well enough the character of the neighborhood and the quiet residential aspect of this neighborhood. I would hate to see it changed by a road like this, and I think this road would significantly change the character of this neighborhood. So I would just urge you to go ahead and go back to the drawing board and see if you could come up with a plan that addresses the safety issue, of course, but also the quiet nature of this neighborhood. And thank you.
Thank you. Nancy Wilson.
Hi, I'm Nancy Wilson. I'm with the Associated Students of the University of Montana, Office of Transportation. This is, ironically, Bike Walk Bus Week in Missoula. And on campus, we run a giant raffle, and we have a lot of people come to our table, and we talk to a lot of people. I talked to hundreds, maybe thousands of people today. It was exhausting, so I don't know if my brain is fully attached. But I did not hear anyone excited about this project. When I would show them this project, they would be mortified that this is the size of the project that someone is considering in the university district right here at our front door. We need to do better than this. We need to build a beautiful project. We don't need to take an intersection from anywhere Montana and plop it in the university district. We can be more creative. It can be a beautiful, safe project. This is not it. We have made many comments. We're concerned that we're not seeing any action coming from the comments that we're making. And we really want to know, how many comments does it take? Give us a number. What does it do when we make these comments? Are we going to see changes in this project, or does somebody just file our comments in the back of a giant report, which is what happened in the EIS? We want to see some action changed. So, a few other comments. I'm mortified if there really were, how many did I see? Were there really 36 public meetings? Because ASUM was not invited. That's 13,000 students. We are directly affected. We were never invited to 36 meetings, I can promise you that. I'm also concerned that someone is using Stevens, or that Stevens is being used as a good pedestrian facility, because there is nowhere near the amount of pedestrian, bicycle, that is not the same kind of corridor. There's nothing about that project that is the same as Arthur. So we really need to look at that as, that's not an example. Mullen Road on Broadway is not an example. I would not cross Broadway at Mullen Road. You would have to be crazy to walk across that street right there. So I'm sorry, that is not a good example. Let's see. Anyway, we just really want you to go back to the drawing board. This is, start over. If you look at the 11 projects that this project surfaced from as the best project, it was the best project of those 11, but those 11 projects were really not good. So, in fact, I've been showing them to people. I was kind of embarrassed. There's one that shows a roundabout at the bottom of Rose Park. We're not quite sure why that's there. It would be kind of fun to drive around it, but I don't see it really as good traffic movement. So I don't know, we just want you to start over. Later you will have a resolution read to you from ASUM. It was passed by the student body that does not support this project. Thank you.
Ben Danalki. Ben. All right, Ben, if you change your mind, we're here. Ron Erickson. And please be sure to identify yourself at the mic again for the record, just in the event that I don't get your name correct.
I'm Ron Erickson, taught at the university for a long time, also in the legislature. When I was in the legislature, it turned out that I was on the oversight committee for the Department of Transportation, and I particularly recall a time with the deputy director where I said something about pedestrians, and particularly along Reserve Street, and what he said was, that was a mistake, we'll never make that mistake again. And that's always good to hear. But what I fear in terms of not the passengers in cars, but people walking, pedestrians, that's the right word, pedestrians and bicyclists, that this isn't the best plan. If one does have to go toward this plan, I certainly hope that we don't allow vehicles to turn left off of Arthur, because that's one of the places where you have to have a much wider street. I'm also very concerned, and I'm going to leave the microphone for this. I'm very concerned about a stoplight there. I think that that's basically kind of crazy, and that it would, if we're going to do something at all, get rid of that part of the street. So I don't know that we've got a good project in front of us. I certainly hope that Bob Giordano is listened to well, and all the folks who are thinking about roundabouts, because that might be the best solution. I don't know the best solution, but I'm pretty sure we don't have it yet. Thank you.
Jack? Or David? David Mann? Any Davids? I'm sorry. There's a lot of letters in your name, David.
I'm Dave Wanzenreed. I have the privilege of representing the area just immediately to the west of this proposed project from Arthur West in the legislature. Just recently, I've gone door to door in that area, and not one person thinks this is a good plan. No one. If you look at the timetable, the last time we did some work in this area was 1957. It's going to be 52 years before we get this thing done with any improvements. And a lot has changed in those intervening years about the nature of transportation. I've already sent a letter to the department, so I'm not going to go through that. But just think about this proposed change right here. It doesn't tell you on there, but those trees on that street are going to be removed. How long did it take those trees to grow? Do we want to sacrifice that area and the houses immediately adjacent to this proposed change? What are we going to be thinking about 50 years from now? The roundabouts are being dismissed because some traffic can't use it, commercial traffic. I happen to work in that industry. I don't think anybody would object to redesignation of the traffic from US 12, where it currently is, onto Reserve Street, except those of us that drive on Reserve Street, right? But we've got to do something. 50 years from now, the traffic cannot flow, commercial traffic cannot flow through this city. And part of the argument now is we've made changes down the way on the pipeline, Malfunction Junction, the other places. We've got federal money there. We can't redesignate that now because if we do, it's going to jeopardize the continued maintenance of that area. So we're necessarily precluded from making changes that we need to make to represent all the modes of transportation. The flow of traffic coming over the bridge now with this proposal, pedestrians beware, and cyclists watch out. It's going to compound the problem. I lived in this neighborhood when I was in graduate school some 30 some odd years ago. It hasn't changed that much. The neighborhood hasn't changed, but the traffic has. The traffic is not just cars, it's people on bicycles and afoot. And this proposed change here and this proposed construction project does not recognize that. We can do better than this. 50 years from now, we won't be here to look at the work that we've left those that go ahead of us. But let's get it right. Let's slow down the process, listen to all the other groups that do have some interest in doing something besides automobile traffic, and do it right, and do it right now. Let's not proceed with this project. Let's get it right by involving people and taking a look at the redesignation of the US 12 route and do it right holistically. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Christy Dodson. And I do see some of you leaving. If you'd make sure that you're on the sign-in sheets for the record so that we know you were here, would appreciate that. Christy?
Hello. Thank you for all your hard work. Don't mean to be rude about the anachronisms. It's just that I'm a dunce and I don't read the newspaper.
Tilt the mic down, please.
Tone it down?
Just tilt it.
Tilt it?
There you go.
Oh, can you hear me now? Okay. I'm here for many reasons, but mainly because I was called at the last minute. I grew up in Missoula. I'm 5 generations. I've been away from home for 10 years, and I've come home. People called and said, they're going to pave Jeanette Rankin Peace Park. I'm a singer. I was part of the dedication for that park. So I showed up at 4 o'clock and due to a bunch of miscommunication, there was supposed to be a 4 to 6:30 open house where I thought I was going to get updated, so I don't know what's going on. But I think I have the solution. I think people should watch more old movies, like me. Because in the old movies, you'll see wonderful, romantic public transportation. So you don't have all these cars on Highway 12 and all over Missoula. I'm a nervous wreck. I've always been one. But after coming home, there are cars everywhere. You can't walk. You can't ride your bike. You can't drive without almost getting killed every day. So, but in those old movies, seriously, they have these wonderful trains and buses and streetcars and trolleys, and you meet your true love, and you have community. And, you know, cars are so isolating. It's just you and your car, or you and your spouse fighting or something, you know. But just think how you're shooting yourself in the foot, especially single engineers, if they're, you know, I mean, you could really meet somebody great on a train. So I'm just asking everybody, work every day for more public transportation. Thank you, and I love you all.
All right. Benjamin starts with a C. Oh, thank you.
Hi, my name is Benjamin Corto. I've been on the ASUM Opposite Transportation Board for 4 years. I was a student, now alum of the university. I'm going to follow up on what Nancy Wilson had to say. I'm going to go ahead and read quickly the resolution that was passed through the ASUM Senate, which stands for the Associated Students of the University of Montana, for those who don't know. It is the representative body that represents all the 13,000 plus students of the university. I'll just go ahead and read it now. Whereas the ASUM resolution, which was passed last spring, called for a public meeting in order for the student body and the general public to comment on this project. And whereas the meeting held in response to the above-mentioned resolution was held in early April 2005. Whereas there was considerable student and public opposition to the Montana Department of Transportation preferred alternative design of the Arthur Avenue project, specifically to the large size of the proposed road expansion. Whereas the road width proposed for Arthur Avenue between 5th and 6th Streets and the MDT preferred alternative design is about 100 feet, which is wider than Reserve Street. Whereas the current preferred alternative for the project will cause significant disruption of pedestrian and bicycle safety and create an environment conducive to increased motor vehicle speeds. Whereas the ASUM Office of Transportation Board, after reviewing the draft environmental assessment submitted by MDT, has concluded that the draft environmental assessment has failed to adequately address the concerns of the student body and the general public and has failed to meet all the specified goals of the project. Therefore, let it be resolved that the ASUM does not support either option proposed in the draft. Basically, this sums up our dissatisfaction with the public process. Last year, we called for a meeting because there hadn't been one since 2003. For 2 years, there hadn't been any meeting that ASUM had been invited to. So we called for a meeting, we invited people to it, we submitted our comments, and 1 year later we have an identical project in the EA. And I feel that that's unacceptable. Our board felt that, and the representative body of the students agreed. There it is. I have copies of the resolution if anybody would like one.
Did I skip Eric Benson? Eric? Okay. Clint starts with an S. Clint? Oh, okay.
Hi, guys. Let's see, I definitely, hi. Oh, my name is Clint Stifler. Nice to meet you. Well, I'm totally unprepared for this, so I'll keep it short, passing on to the next person. Well, I'm starting to draw a quick blank here. Bob Giordano pointed out a lot of things that I guess I wanted to say to start with, but it looks like from what you hear around campus, your guys' lack of involvement with the ASUM, you're not representing the people that will be mostly affected by this intersection, the student body. Which is just weird. Why? I don't understand the money in that. Other thing being, it seems like the model's going to increase traffic flow hard down 6th Street, if I'm interpreting that right. Yesterday, actually, my roommate pulled out and got T-boned by a Chevy truck, which demolished her car. She survived the accident, but shoved it directly into my car. 3 cars were wrecked. So I suppose anything that's going to increase the traffic on the road, I just hope you guys take safety as number one. And I'm going to go now. Bob, thanks for taking care of all my questions for me. So thanks, guys.
Joe, something R-O-A-C-K, Broach?
Hi, my name is Joe Broach, and I always have a lot to say anyway, but tonight I actually speak on behalf of my wife, who couldn't be here. My wife, Rachel, probably more than anyone else in this town has experience using the current configuration of Madison as a cyclist and a pedestrian. She works downtown and commutes from our apartment in the University District every day, and she's also involved with the Missoula Children's Theater, where she is tonight, rehearsing for a production. So she uses that a lot, and I think that she would be concerned with the characterization of the proposed plan as being better for cyclists and pedestrians. And I wonder if these cyclists and pedestrians who are being referred to, I mean, looking at intersections like this, I can't really imagine one, and neither can my wife, that would look at that and think, that looks a lot better to me. It looks like a place I want to ride or walk. And so her concern, and I echo it as well, is were these real cyclists and pedestrians that you were thinking of, or were these just computer models? And to finish, Rachel says this project, not in her name as a cyclist and pedestrian. Thank you.
Natalie Shapiro. All right, thank you. Jennifer Mayer. Jennifer? Okay. Vicki Watson?
My name is Alexandra Volkerts, and I live in the university area, very near the area that's going to be redesigned. I've also lived in a number of major metropolitan areas in the United States and abroad. I've lived with roundabouts in London. I've lived with roundabouts in Berkeley, California. I know they work. The biggest problem with this proposal is that it's being designed to handle trucks. The major obstacle for keeping these roundabouts safe, if they're a double-lane roundabout, is that trucks can't manage them. If anything should be a red flag that trucks do not belong in a residential area, that alone should be an indication of it. Highway 12 goes right through a residential area. I've spoken with several city council members, and they agree that perhaps this needs to be looked at again to see whether or not Highway 12 should be rerouted out of a residential area. I would ask this project be put on hold until people have the opportunity to develop local political action to see if we can find a way to get trucks out of residential areas. The second thing I wanted to make, comment I wanted to make is that another objection to roundabouts is that the visibility from the Madison Street Bridge is inadequate to provide warning that you're coming up on a roundabout. There are a number of ways to deal with that. Europe uses signs. This is not a unique concept. You can warn people that a roundabout is coming up with a large sign on Madison Street. Most people can read, and if they can't read, they can understand symbols. The one thing I do want to commend the department on is that they have taken considerable effort, or at least they state they've taken considerable effort, to make these intersections handicap accessible. I'm a disability rights attorney. Handicap accessibility is of considerable importance to me and to the people that I represent. I don't see a 100-foot wide street as being negotiated by the people that I work with physical disabilities in any reasonable amount of time. And if they start late on a light, as many people do, they would find themselves stranded in the middle of this massive intersection. While I commend the department for making this a priority, I do not see how this plan, in fact, protects the people that I represent. Thank you.
Vicki?
Hi, I'm Vicki Watson, and I've lived for 23 years, just a couple of blocks from this proposed project, and I wish I had a nickel for every time I've gone around that rectangle on foot, on a bike, or in a car. So I think I know this area pretty well, and I do agree that it needs some work, but I'm going to agree with most of the speakers up to this point that the the plan that's been proposed would make the situation worse rather than better. And what I want to call on I think these are some smart designers here, and they can solve any sort of problem as long as they are given the right set of constraints. And I realize that one of the constraints that they're working with here is that they believe that the rerouting of Highway 12 is an impossibility because it would require the city of Missoula to take on the cost of maintaining those roads. But I do think that if you included the rerouting of Highway 12 as an alternative and seriously studied it and showed how much traffic would be reduced, how much the traffic volume would be reduced, and the wide range of additional alternatives that become viable alternatives at that point, at that lower traffic volume, I think it would really make Missoula think that might be worthwhile to take that on, that, you know, they're not going to take on a big new cost when all you say is all those alternatives aren't viable, this is the only thing that can be done. But if you say, yep, move the Highway 12 traffic and all this range of alternatives becomes viable, then the city of Missoula, well, I know that I and a few other people here are going to be after the city council to make that decision. So if you would do that in an EA or an EIS, add in that rerouting Highway 12 alternative, then apply your considerable creativity to solving the disability access issue. One thing that occurs to me is a beautiful arching pedestrian overpass over these intersections. I remember once seeing some sort of plan of the University of Montana to have an archway that was the entrance to the University of Montana with a big grizzly on it and so on. Well, that archway could be a pedestrian overpass over the intersections there. I guess the other idea, game day. People worry a lot about game day. Why aren't we busing people from remote parking lots instead of trying to park them all on campus during game day? So as soon as just a lower traffic volume alternative is taken seriously, I think all the concerns, that solutions are available to those things. So take it as seriously as you've taken these, solving the problems of the preferred alternative, and you smart guys will come up with solutions.
I'm guessing it's Garth T-Berry. Starts with a G, first name, last name starts with a T. Anyone fitting that description? Okay. How about Elliot? Starts with an R. Oh, excellent. Will you restate your name?
Hi, my name is Elliot Reed, and I'm a student here at the University of Montana. And last year, I used to live in this house right here, right on the corner of 5th and Arthur. And in that time I used to live there, I would bike to school every day and walk to school. And I had several close calls with cars not yielding to pedestrians and 18-wheelers coming by and making their wide turns and cutting the corners of curbs. And so I'm in favor of a roundabout and the rerouting of Highway 12. I think that in this area, it takes away the character of it. And the 18-wheelers, when they would come by, they'd be so loud, they would rattle the windows of our house. And my neighbor, they had kids, and their kids, they wouldn't play with them in the front yard at all, because it's dangerous. And my roommates, we had a few dogs too. We would never take them out in the front yard because fear they'd get hit. So I think that these proposed plans do not accommodate to the people at all. They just accommodate to commercial traffic. And so I think we should reroute Highway 12. Thank you.
Alexandra Volkerts? Alexandra? Oh, okay, great. How about Phil Condon?
Yeah, I'm Phil Condon. I teach here at the university. I've lived in Missoula for 20 years. Phil Condon. I teach at the university, and I've lived in Missoula for 20 years. And I'm also the chair of the City Advisory Board for pedestrian bicycle issues. And I've been looking at the EA hurriedly here tonight, so I don't know everything to say about it, and I'm not as organized as my written comments will be later. But the first thing it's in the EA that I find flawed in this, and somebody spoke to it already, but I want to reiterate, is the public process. I think it is a mischaracterization to say that there's 36 meetings over a 5-year period. A lot of these meetings were between the city, and MDT, and they may have been public, and somebody may have known about them, but I know as part of the Bike Ped Board, I've been following this, and the only large-scale meeting I know of at all was the one last spring. At that time, too, the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Board sent a letter to MDT, passed unanimously by the board, objecting to basically this very option that's come back a year later, and urging them to explore alternatives, which perhaps they've done. But I will note in the correspondence appendices, that letter from a city board wasn't included. I just feel like it's, I don't sense any bad purpose here, but I think the public process has been mischaracterized as wide open when, for people to follow this, I don't really feel it has been. Here now we're presented, if I understand it, with the kind of classic case of here's 2 alternatives, you get to pick. Well, from what I'm hearing, and I don't think either alternative is very good and will solve long-range needs and be in character of this district. And what are our options beyond that? Well, it sounds like either no plan or a thicker document. I mean, I really do think we need to take a look at how this is developed, despite for whatever good intentions. I don't think it's gotten the kind of public participation that it really needs, a project of this scope in this area. And I also just want to speak to the fact that what I sense is that MDT is in a tough position here. It is a difficult intersection geographically, and if I'm reading things right, people have spoken to this, but the constraints, the boxes we're in, are this Highway 12 problem, and so I do think that we need to talk to our city about this. Long range, does Highway 12 belong here, and what options would this open up for the university to get it out of the neighborhood? And also the memo of understanding, which I haven't read the whole thing, but it's signed by Vice President Duringer. I think that the university has had dozens of meetings with MDT about this, and they've created this memo of understanding, and it's also adding to the box that is smaller and smaller and results in this plan. And I will also note one other thing I just saw in the EA. There is a big discussion about roundabouts. The only aerial picture, as somebody mentioned, is a roundabout at the base of Rankin Park, not like these drawings are, or like some other drawings in the plan. But where it says, discusses roundabouts, it says they were rejected basically because of capacity and impact to the historic district. That's when it first brings up roundabouts. And again, I don't think capacity should be the driving force. And if I understand everything I understand about the citizen plan that's been put forward, I don't think it has as much impact on the historic district in terms of land taken, houses taken, amount of Jeanette Rankin Park taken, and apparently there's a disagreement between what the MDT is analyzing and the citizen plan that the Bike Ped Board looked at last year. So I guess I would just add my voice, and I can't speak for the board yet. We'll be considering this, I'm sure, looking at it again, but I know as of last year, our voice was to get creative, to really consider where this is being located, to do everything we can to find out what it would take to relocate Highway 12 and to come up with something. This strikes me as an old-fashioned solution, a 20th century solution to something that we can, there's more alternatives and we can do more. Thank you.
Colin Colin? How about Rick Gold?
Hello, my name's Rick Gold. I'm resident of Missoula now, about 10 years, and I do a lot of biking and walking, and I'm glad you all came to this meeting tonight because I have to admit I'm a recovering oilaholic. Right now, we're in Iraq because we don't have enough oil in America. 70% of the oil that we use daily comes from outside the United States. Our children are dying in the Mideast right now because we can't figure out how to drive less. I'd like to know where these people got their transportation modeling trips, or, you know, how many people are going to be on this road when gas hits $6 next year. It's $2.80 right now. How many people are driving less?
Sir, can I ask you to limit your comments to the environmental assessment?
Where's this addressed in your environmental assessment? Peak oil, it's called. We can't pump any more out of the earth. We can't. So where is this in the federal EIS? We need to start thinking about using alternative means of transportation. Oil is not going to last that much longer. Let's all start thinking creatively. We're in the 21st century. Thank you.
Angie Lipsky.
Hi, I'm Angie Lipsky. And I actually own the little cute house right on this corner, the little yellow bungalow, the cutest of the historic structures, I'll have you know. And, you know, I'm not against change, and I'm not against what the vision could be of a big alumni center here, a whole grand entry statement into the University of Montana. But as other folks have said here tonight, like, I think that what's proposed is against the character of the neighborhood. And the root of it is the Highway 12 and getting Highway 12 out. You know, and if it comes in at Reserve and Brooks, we got to connect it up to I-90, it does seem that Reserve is a likely soulless thoroughfare to get the stuff up there. So as opposed to, you know, putting all those trucks in a historic neighborhood. Once the historic neighborhood starts being degraded and the structures go away and the width of the streets and the trees and that sort of thing, you know, we can't get it back. So, and, you know, contrary to a lot of people here, though, I do not believe the roundabout is the right solution. Living there, I lived there for 3 years of the 5 years I've owned it, and you want to see kids cruise off a bridge. I just think the roundabout will just even be more fun to be had, truthfully. So I don't agree with it, and I also think it's fairly pointless to try to deal with the backups of traffic for game days. 7 whole days and then the basketball schedule, who cares? It's a geography issue of the university being up against the mountain and its bottlenecks coming in and coming out. And unless we have more access points in and out, there's going to be bottlenecks. So, I mean, who cares? And I lived on the corner and I lived through it. So, and yeah, I guess that's about it. So, I mean, I just think that there's a lot to be said about the bigger vision, about a gorgeous entry statement, about this not needing to be 100 feet, even though I'm not against change. So, thank you.
Right. Celeste River. Celeste? Oh, okay.
Hello, my name is Celeste River, and let's see, I do have a couple of questions. I wonder, I haven't quite caught it, what it is that would make the city have to take over responsibility of Highway 12 if it were moved from the route that it's been in since Missoula was a little small, little logging town. I'm not quite sure why it can't be moved and still have it be a state highway responsibility, but, and I wonder about the sort of set mentality about these preferred plans, if it isn't that they fit in best with some plan the university has that we're just not being told about, which would make it make more sense then if we were told why these are the set ideas. These are just thoughts I've had while I'm listening to all of this. Also, it strikes me that the ASUM and the transportation director and the bike ped chair of the city's bicycle pedestrian committee both say that the statements they sent in 1 year ago they feel were not honored or responded to. That's just another thought that's come to me. But my main thought is not pro or con. It's just that for the past 24 hours I've been working on a resolution for our neighborhood, our community forum of neighborhood councils to send forward a resolution in support of a large number of neighbors from the Grant Creek area who have been spending much of their own personal volunteer time to figure out and plan how to improve and beautify and assure maintenance of the interchange at I-90 and North Reserve and Grant Creek. And one thing I've heard about the problem there is that after the Department of Transportation built that interchange and it wasn't and the city, it's the city's responsibility, not the state's, to maintain that interchange. But something was done wrong in the filling of the medians where plantings were going to occur. And it's bad, like gravel and rock underneath there. And these citizens are having to figure out how to drum up the money to get that junk out of there. That's what they call it, is junk. And replace it with good planting bedding because the trees are dead now that were planted there. And so that's just my comment as a citizen who's taking time to try to help those citizens of the Grant Creek area improve and beautify that prominent major gateway of Missoula that we've been left with that was done improperly. I'm concerned that this the beautification of this area be done properly, so the citizens are not left with something 5 or 10 years later that they have to try to redo. Thank you.
Regina, thank you.
Hi, I'm Regina Stazak. I'm a student here at the U of M, and I am a huge biker pedestrian. I came from Billings. It's petrifying to try to bike in this town. One of the main reasons I came here was to enjoy the outdoors and to be able to go out biking without feeling like there's going to be a death wish from cars. I really don't like this new idea because they're going to speed up the limit to 45 miles per hour. It's bad enough going 25 or 30 on a bike trail with cars coming, and sometimes they're not always going the speed limit. These roundabouts, I don't even know what to say about them. They're just, they're petrifying that, if they're going to do a 2-lane, how the heck they get around to the point for bikers to not be able to get hit, because the 2-lane and trucks, I have a little car and I haven't drove it because it's in Billings, but it's bad enough in a little car to be next to a semi, but a bike or walking is another story. Hopping, I've got a little sister, and walking across even a small area to get across is a nutcase just with a little girl. My mom's worked with a lot of disability people, and it just is ridiculous that they're going to try and make the span to 100 feet, and there's no possible way. And after, I don't know if there's anything that do with the law that someone in Chicago got a ticket for walking too slow, or I'm not sure where it was anymore, but that'd be ridiculous, and I don't feel that this is going to work unless they take it back to the drawing board. There's no way this is going to work for pedestrians. This is for cars or for big trucks. And I believe that they need to reroute the trucks somewhere else. Thank you.
And Jim Sayer.
My name's Jim Sayer. I live in the neighborhood. I just think this process is kind of a joke. I mean, who is a decision maker on this project, and when are they actually going to communicate in person with the people who are going to be affected by this project in Missoula? This is a joke because we're speaking to the consultants who are being paid a fairly good sum to do this. We're talking to employees who are being paid by the state. But when are we going to talk to actual decision makers who will actually understand the consequences of what's going on? I was laughing because I read the EA and it said it's context-sensitive design. And for those of you who don't know, that's the latest buzzword in transportation about how you actually make your transportation projects work with the adjacent neighborhood or surrounding community. Well, as everybody here has said, this doesn't work at all with the existing community. In fact, it'll probably rip a gaping hole in the community, because I've been to many university towns, and one of the coolest things about Missoula is there's a complete woven fabric between the campus and the existing neighborhood. That's why people can walk across in comfort across dozens of streets, not just one, and not an overpass with a beautiful arch to separate people from the actual landscape. I think the other big problem with this is that it's totally traffic inducing. I mean, if you look at that design, what you're doing is, first of all, you're going to jam more cars into the neighborhood. I'd really like to see the capacity, because I couldn't see it in the EA when I flipped through it, and I looked at it earlier too. I'd like to know the actual number of cars, the volume that could be achieved through jamming these cars into the neighborhood. I think the lights will encourage drag racing mentality during non-peak hours, and during peak hours it'll encourage the bottleneck that was mentioned earlier when you're taking 4 lanes and cramming them into 2. Worst, and this is really ironic, it's going to create a complete dead zone. Some of you may not know this, but do you know Jane Jacobs, famous urban planner? Well, she died today, and she was the person responsible for writing The Death and Life of Great American Cities. And you know what she said? She said the worst thing that you can do to an urban fabric is tear a big hole in it. Well, that's exactly what this is all about, tearing a big hole in an urban fabric. And once, as Angie said, you tear one hole, then you degrade an area, people will avoid it. They won't walk there. I was just talking with Jeff Badnock, who lives on 5th Street, and you know what? I don't see that many people walking on 5th or 6th for the very reason a couple of people mentioned. They're concerned by the noise, the potential for getting hit, their kids, their pets. So, you know, you're going to tear a big hole in an area that's not known for big holes in its urban fabric. It's an absolutely stupid idea. We should look at rerouting Highway 12, and we should go back to the drawing board and let the community do this, because I think having the state do it is an absolute mistake.
Don Nicholson. Don?
I'm Don Nicholson, and I am not a student. Not since '56, anyway. I'm a resident of Missoula from 1934 on, so and I lived in this neighborhood, so I've been here a long time. And I'm here to listen, because I am on the city council, and I am one of the decision makers, as someone asked about a bit ago. I take very seriously my job as being chairman of the Transportation Committee and the communication link to the City Council. The main reason I'm here is to listen and to try to accurately report back the consensus of the comments that have been made here tonight. But I do want to point out some what I think are disconnects. One of which is the university is they're given credit for contributing right away. This memorandum of agreement was signed in May of 2001 with George Dennison and Mike Cadis and someone from the Highway Department. But there's a trade envisioned there, wherein the land here is traded for land in Lake County. I think, and there's an appraisal involved in it, so I think it's a dollar-for-dollar appraisal trade. So it isn't something that the university is doing other than acquiring the property, which they did do. The other thing we talked about, as mentioned, is that we're going to improve the environment. Now, I don't know how many times I took a lecture on the malfunction junction, and the environment was bad because the stoplights were there, and everybody was idling, waiting to get through there, and so the carbon monoxide and the particulate was up and up and up, and we would improve things greatly if we would time lights and get them to go through. Well, here we've got 2 more stoplights with 2 more people, groups of cars idling and putting out monoxide and carbon monoxide and particulate. I think, and I can't tell whether this proposed settlement that's a good deal is option 1 or option 2. It's pretty clear there's none of the proposals that are interested in roundabouts. However, there's a lot of people in this room interested in roundabouts. And so back to the drawing board seems to be pretty clear. And the idea of redesignating Highway 12, and that's a pure money deal. We, the city, get quite a bit of money for maintaining those streets, and so we try pretty hard to have 93 here and 10 there and I-90 here and US 12 there, so we get on different streets to get different amounts of money from the state. I agree with that. That's a good way to fund an awful lot of the main streets in town, but there are some problems here. And what I guess I'm hearing is, and I want to look at my notes just a minute, see, because I get one chance at this, right? And I'm about the last on the list. One of the options is no build. And it looks to me pretty clearly that there's some work to be done. I mentioned this looks a lot like the proposal that I looked at in 2003 when I went down and asked for it. I'd be interested in a list of changes that had been made from the 2003 list to the 2001 list, or 6 lists, whatever it is. I don't think there's many, because it looks a lot like it was before. And last thing is, we're having a devil of a time getting a stoplight installed on West Broadway. The traffic count there is 23,000 vehicles. I'd like to see the traffic count on Maurice here that justifies stoplights, and it needs to be north of 23,000. Thank you very much.
Naomi Beal. Naomi? Oh.
Hello, my name is Naomi Beal, and I was a student at the university for an undisclosed amount of years, thanks to my parents. But I now work for the county, and I would like to talk about my change in location in this town. I lived on campus and in this neighborhood for 6 years. Okay, there it is. And I didn't own a car. I didn't have a car. I lived in this town without a car for 6 years and was perfectly capable of getting around, and that's why I stayed here. And then I moved to the other side of Reserve Street. And it's funny how this hearing is taking place during Bike Walk Bus Week, as we have discussed, because I don't have that option. And maybe that's based on my fear, but I will not cross Reserve on foot or on bike. I won't do it. It is scary, it's dangerous, and that is exactly what this looks like, except bigger. Reserve Street is 75 feet across, I guess. This is obviously bigger than that, and that's ridiculous. And then I've also heard people around here saying, that's the reason why I moved to Missoula. I was accepted to med school in Los Angeles. This is the reason why I stayed in Missoula, because I can get around. I don't have to fear walking out of my house every day, and this takes away that security that you have being a resident in a small town and being all right with not having to have every resident of this town own a vehicle to get around. It's very disconcerting to somebody. That's the reason why I stayed here. Also, one quick note, which don't kick me out, please. That woman that was killed, it was a very sad thing. I was standing right there. She was killed by a drunk driver. If we want to talk about game day, let's talk about the fact how much alcohol is sold out of this place and how many of those people are driving. What do we need to focus on? Those people shouldn't be driving in the first place. We shouldn't be dealing with their traffic problems. Thank you.
We'll never kick anybody out that's against drunk drivers, I can tell you that. Jocelyn Siller? Sorry.
I'll be quick. Everybody else has been so brilliant. Thank you so much. I am a teacher at the University of Montana, and I've been living in the university area for 29 years. And I run through this area every morning at the high traffic time, so I do know it very well. I love the university area because it's a walkable, runnable, bikeable area. And if you actually look at this big intersection here, it's a half a block wide. And I mean, watch. It is half of that block wide, and that is massive. That is not in the environmental, you know what I mean. It's just, yes, it doesn't fit into the university area at all. It's just obscenely large. And other people had a lot of really cool things to say. One thing that I do want to say is that I do think that one of the premises, one of the purposes is absolutely wrong, and that is the idea that this is going to improve access to the university. It's going to improve vehicle access to the university, and we have just about as much vehicle access as we can deal with. That's all. Thanks a lot, guys.
Isaac Glenfell.
Well, I found out about this like 2 hours ago, and I've only had that long to think about it, and I've come up with a whole list of problems, and a lot of you guys have already mentioned most of them. But this just seems like the height of foolishness to me. I spent a little bit of time as an economics major here, and one of the first things you learn is that people respond to incentives. And so if you widen the road, more people are going to use it. So you'll just be back to where you started with a big traffic snarl with 4 lanes of traffic. So it's not that won't solve anything. So I guess what I'm saying is that there probably is a better arrangement for all this, but your first principle in all of this should be to do no harm. Don't make it worse. You know, I mean, if you can't think of anything better, then just don't touch it. So, I don't know. That's about all I have to say.
Is there anybody else who I missed on the list or who changed their mind and has something to say, ma'am?
Hello, my name's Lee Clemenson, and I live on the corner of McLeod and Arthur. So obviously, this is of great import for us in our house. I'm a native Missoulian and have come back here to retire. Now, obviously, the issue is capacity, and you've got to cut the capacity in order to improve the situation. And the way you cut the capacity is take Highway 12 out of the mix. Once you get Highway 12 out and get rid of the commercial trucks and the ability to zoom across and then cut up Brooks to 93, you will improve the situation quite a bit. Then you can get by with a single roundabout or a much simpler arrangement. But until you cut the capacity and do some kind of intellectual change of this issue, you're still going to be dealing with a lot of traffic. Another issue is I ran for Ward 3 and didn't quite make it in the city council, but I did find that in walking the ward twice, it was very, very informative. And walking 5th and 6th and Brooks, I was appalled by the amount of traffic which is being funneled through, zooming through a residential area, including logging trucks and everything else. And it seems only rational to get those trucks and that capacity out of there to run through the big trucks. People on 5th and 6th also park on the street because many of them do not have alleys. So they can't park behind it. So they are battling constantly with this heavy flow coming through their neighborhood. Secondly, if you put this through, how long will it be before the rest of Arthur and South are extended to 4-lane traffics to handle additional commercial traffic? Several of our trees have been clipped by commercial trucks. and damaged. And it would be very nice if we went back to making this a residential area for university and residential traffic, and making it so it's really a compact, correct situation. The traffic right now is growing exponentially each year. Don't make it worse. Thank you.
Anybody else who wasn't on the list? Yeah.
My name is Betsy Mulligan-Daig. I'm the director of the Jeanette Rankin Peace Center. I would like to just say that this intersection is definitely a challenge. What is the best thing to deal with the challenge is a healthy, informed dialogue with people that are interested in the issue. And I would urge you to take the advice of the people in this room. There's a lot of folks that live in this neighborhood and live in this community that are passionate about what it looks like and what the character of Missoula contributes to their neighborhoods. And there's been a wonderful wealth of ideas presented tonight, and I hope that you'll engage those ideas. I also would like to say that I am regretful of any cutting into Jeanette Rankin Park.
My name's Tom Roy. I'm semi-retired from the university. More importantly, I'm a resident of the university area. I live at 541 Evans, which is on the corner of Arthur and Evans. I was at a previous meeting and didn't get here until about 7:30 or 7:45. Had not intended to speak, but did want to make two observations. And in making these observations, I think I'm really reinforcing not only what some other speakers have said, but I think probably reflect very much the conversation that's been taking place in my immediate neighborhood. The first observation I'd like to make is this notion that somehow any of these plans protects the historic nature of the neighborhood is, on its face, absolutely preposterous. We just heard from, and I apologize, I don't remember her name, from the woman who mentioned Jeanette Rankin Park. Take a park out that's been an historic part of our neighborhood. It's a little hard to imagine how that protects the historic nature of the neighborhood. When we bought our home, a fellow by the name of Jim Garlington lived across the street. He was a longtime resident of Missoula, a very distinguished attorney here, a member of the Constitutional Convention in the early 1970s. And when we were looking at the house, Jim said, you know, you should buy this house on Evans, the one we currently live in, and we've lived in for 31 plus years. He said, it's absolutely delightful. Our kids grew up across the street, and they were able to play on Arthur Avenue, and he started telling me about football games they played and so forth and so on. Truth is, when we moved to Missoula, it was possible for kids to actually play on Arthur Avenue. Now, you had to be somewhat careful at certain points in time. We used to park our car on Arthur. We have an entrance to our home, either off of Evans or off of Arthur. Historically, the Arthur entrance was the entrance to our home. It hasn't been for years. And the reason is exactly what Jim Sayre says. Increasing traffic. And my concern with any of these plans, and I will acknowledge that I haven't had a chance to look at these in any detail whatsoever, but and Lee Clemenson just brought this up too, it seems to me any of these plans create that gap, that opening. And I know the concern further south on Arthur is this is but probably the beginning. And that's worrisome to us, and it certainly would destroy the historic character of the neighborhood. Quickly, the second point I'd like to make is I believe that this process has not been as inclusive as it should be. I happen to serve on certain university planning committees. I'm not fearful that the university's interests will be represented in this, have been represented in this process. But I can say, as a resident, my interests and the interests of my neighbors have not in any way been represented. As I've listened tonight, and again, I didn't intend to speak, but as I listened, I thought, isn't this interesting? We're concerned about protecting the historic character of a neighborhood, but what seems to be driving this is commercial traffic and the interests of the university. Well, what about those of us who live in the neighborhood? Thank you.
Was there anybody else who wanted to make comments tonight? I see you all. Oh. Sure. We're supposed to be out of the room by 9, so, oh, come on up. Will you state your name?
Hi, my name is Ross Prosperi, P-R-O-S-P-E-R-I. I also just want to draw attention to the irony of us having an energy symposium on the other side of the UC right now, and also the irony of it being Bike Walk Bus Week, and we're having the roundabout plan scrapped because of lack of the ability for it to provide the capacity of cars that we have. And I just think it really needs to be addressed that, you know, we don't want to perpetuate the increased number of cars. As the individual said earlier, we create the incentive by expanding the road. We're going to see an increase of cars on that road. And so it's going to be kind of a self-perpetuating reconstruction or reconfiguration. And I think it's obvious that, you know, most people agree we need to reroute Highway 12. And that seems to be the reason we need to bring this back to the drawing board, to take that, that amount of capacity that Highway 12 supplies and just take that out of the university district. But I just would like to see the Montana Department of Transportation try and address these issues of, you know, reconfigurations with the idea that we want to lessen the amount of cars on the road and reduce the amount of personal automobile usage so that we can see actual increases and improvements of environmental quality as far as air conditions and accessibility to our communities. Thank you so much.
Was there anybody else who hadn't had a chance to speak yet? Anybody who wanted another 3 minutes? Thanks. As I see everybody leaving, I just, go ahead and come up. Just wanted to thank you for coming and your input. It's well thought out, and we really do appreciate that. If you do have additional comments, please take a comment form. The information on how to submit those is at the bottom of the form, and we encourage you to do so.
So, Vicki Watson again. I wanted to emphasize the need to provide the same level of analysis of the pedestrian and bike traffic that has been provided, you know, in terms of modeling the flow of the vehicular traffic. Admittedly, I just picked up the EA for the first time and was flipping through it trying to find this, and I may just have not found it yet, but I think it's really important to analyze the flow of bike and pedestrian traffic underneath the bridge, the new bridge for bike and pedestrian traffic that's there underneath the road bridge, and analyze where that traffic goes. You know, what's the best way to bring that traffic safely on into the university campus, and how does that mesh with this project? And there's the bike and pedestrian traffic that takes place on the old Van Buren Bridge. That comes into the area, moves through. So the modeling of, you know, counting pedestrians and bicyclists and where they're going and how they're moving and how they're using their alternative routes. I think for the most part, it'd be not only is it wise to get the Highway 12 traffic out of here, but to provide alternate routes away from these intersections for bicyclists to use, and then things like pedestrian overpasses and so on. So don't just think about accommodating everybody at street level and trying to put them all through the same intersections. Maybe it's better to send some of them to completely different places, avoiding each other as much as possible.
Bob Giordano again. I just want to mention one thing. It was a story I wanted to tell before, and that was, I've heard in talking to people, there was an older gentleman that told me about Rose Park. And you know, Brook Street comes in, it's 4 lanes, it's hectic. You get into Rose Park and things are a lot calmer. Well, then that meets Higgins, and it's 2 lanes. He told me that a long time ago that there was a proposal to make it a 4 or 5 lane like Orange Street, and that the neighbors said no. We don't want to lose our trees was a big part of that. And they were told, well, you're going to be faced with gridlock. You're not going to meet the capacity. But if you go out there, it works. It's a beautiful road. We create the future we want to see. And if we want a great walkable, bikeable transit community and drivers fit in, but they're not speeding through and staring at the lights and trying to make it all work, we can do that. So I just wanted to tell that story. And then I know there's a lot of confusion about what a roundabout is. Here's just a simple picture. It's not an East Coast rotary that's giant and high speed and multi-lane. It's not the little neighborhood calming circles. It's a size that's getting perfected. So we can, and every day there are new roundabout designs that are happening. One other picture, this was in the picture in the Missoulian today. This is a citizen plan that's been referred to a little bit. It's a very simple thing. It utilizes single lane roundabouts, and it actually turns this part of the road into a greenway which connects the Peace Park into the Riverfront Trail System. There's a lot of other changes that would have to happen, but let's get creative. Let's open up the process. Let's figure out what other ideas are out there. And it does connect to trains and buses. And I got doored on Higgins riding my bike 2 days ago because I had to move over, and I hit a car door opening. I fly over and I roll and brush myself off, and I'm thinking, you know, we could have 5 times the amount of bicyclists in this community if we made it safe to do so. People want to choose that. So maybe Missoula is a little different than these other places. We're perfectly suited for other modes. We're flat and it's dry, and it's people come here to be outdoors and appreciate that. So I just thank you for letting me add that in there.
I think we have time for 1 or 2 more people if you had anything else to add. Well, thank you again for coming, for sharing your well-thought-out comments, for being part of this process, and for enduring the very long meeting. Wanted to reiterate that staff will be here if you had questions that you wanted to address to them directly, and also if you decide you want to submit comments in writing, please do so. The deadline is June 2nd.